Princess Zarathal stood on the observation deck of the Keth Moran space station, her silver skin shimmering with frustration. Behind her, 12 of the galaxy's most advanced starships floated in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering. Yet none of them would carry her home. "Your Highness," said Commander Veltar, his tentacles writhing nervously. "The hegemony cruiser has quantum shielding and can cross 3 sectors in 2 days. Surely it meets your requirements." Zarathal's crystalline eyes flashed. "It smells of death and conquest. I will not travel in a ship built for war." She turned away from the massive gray vessel, its hull bristling with weapons. The commander's 4 arms gestured helplessly. Then perhaps the ethereal vessel? It was crafted by the finest artists of Silthara. The interior walls sing with harmonious frequencies. "Too delicate," the princess replied without looking. "1 solar storm and we'd be floating debris." For 3 standard days they had gone through this routine. The Galactic Council had summoned the Princess of Velshara for urgent peace negotiations. Her homeworld was on the brink of civil war, and only she could prevent it. But getting her there proved impossible. The Merchant Guild had offered their fastest courier ship, built for speed and comfort. "It reeks of greed," she had said, wrinkling her nose at the gold-plated interior. The Tech Consortium's AI-controlled vessel was rejected for being soulless. The bioship from the living worlds was too organic and made her skin crawl. Even the crystal ships of her own people failed to meet her mysterious standards. "Your Highness," Veltar said carefully, "with respect, we're running out of options. The peace talks begin in 6 days, and it takes 4 to reach Velshara with conventional drives." Zarathal sighed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She had inherited her grandmother's gift, the ability to sense the true nature of things by touch, smell, and intuition. Ships carried the essence of their creators. Some smelled of oil and machinery, others of sterile laboratories or bloated pride. But none felt right. None felt safe. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "we should wait for more options." That's when the alarms began to sound. Through the massive viewing ports, they watched a ship drop out of hyperspace. It was unlike anything in the assembled fleet. Where the other vessels were sleek and polished, this one looked rough, patched. The hull was a patchwork of different metals and materials, clearly repaired many times over. "What is that?" Zarathal asked. Veltar consulted his datapad, his expression puzzled. "It's human. The registration says Stellar Wind Cargo Class Captain Sarah Mitchell." Human? The princess had heard of them, the newest species to join the galactic community. Young, primitive by most standards, but supposedly clever in unexpected ways. The ship looked like it had been through several wars and at least 1 collision with an asteroid. Burn marks scarred its hull, and one of its engine pods was clearly a replacement that didn't quite match the others. It was barely 2/3 the size of the smallest vessel in their fleet. "Why is it here?" she asked. "According to the manifest, they're delivering medical supplies to the outer rim, but..." Veltar paused, reading more carefully. "It seems Captain Mitchell heard about our situation on the hyperwave radio. She's volunteering to help." Several of the alien dignitaries laughed. A few made dismissive sounds. The human ship looked like scrap metal compared to their advanced vessels. "Shall I tell them we appreciate the offer but have the situation handled?" Veltar asked. Zarathal studied the strange ship. Something about it called to her. Unlike the others, it didn't announce itself with gleaming surfaces or impressive weapons. It simply was, "No," she said slowly. "Ask them to dock. I want to meet this Captain Mitchell." Within an hour, the human ship had maneuvered into the station's docking bay. Zarathal watched from the observation deck as a gangway extended. The ship's crew was small. She counted only 4 people walking down the ramp. The captain was a woman of medium height with graying brown hair tied back in a practical knot. She wore a simple blue jumpsuit with grease stains on the sleeves. No ceremonial decorations, no signs of rank beyond a small patch on her shoulder. "Your Highness," came the captain's voice over the communicator. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I know my ship doesn't look like much, but she's reliable. Got me through more tight spots than I can count." Zarathal found herself walking toward the docking bay without consciously deciding to do so. Something about the human's voice, calm and honest, drew her forward. When she entered the bay, Captain Mitchell approached and offered what the humans called a handshake. Zarathal hesitated. Physical contact would let her sense the woman's true nature, then reached out. The moment their hands touched, Zarathal gasped. There was no deception here, no hidden agenda. Just determination, competence, and something else, hope. The woman genuinely wanted to help, expected nothing in return, and radiated a quiet confidence that spoke of countless challenges overcome. "Your ship," Zarathal said. "May I see it?" Captain Mitchell grinned. "Sure, but I warn you, she's not fancy. We spend our money on engines and life support, not decorations." They walked up the gangway together, Veltar and his staff following with obvious skepticism. The human ship's interior was indeed plain: metal walls, exposed conduits, and functional lighting. But as they moved deeper into the vessel, Zarathal began to understand. Every surface told a story. Scratch marks where cargo had been hastily loaded during an emergency evacuation, reinforced bulkheads from when they'd rescued miners from a collapsing asteroid station, a patch in the wall where they'd sealed a breach after pulling survivors from a derelict ship. This wasn't just a ship. It was a tool for helping others, worn smooth by countless acts of service. "She'll do," Zarathal said suddenly. Veltar's tentacles went rigid with shock. "Your Highness, surely you're not serious. This vessel is primitive, undefended, and—" "Perfect," the princess finished, surprising herself with her certainty. "Captain Mitchell, when can we depart?" Captain Mitchell checked the navigation console one final time as the stellar wind cleared the space station's gravity well. "Jump calculations complete. We'll reach Velshara in 4 days, 2 hours." She looked back at Princess Zarathal, who sat in the observer's seat they'd hastily installed on the bridge. "Comfortable, Your Highness?" The princess nodded, though comfort wasn't exactly what she felt. The human ship's bridge was cramped compared to the luxury vessels she usually traveled in. But something about the organized chaos felt right. Every surface served a purpose. Nothing was wasted on appearance alone. "Your Highness," said Veltar, who had insisted on accompanying her despite his obvious distress at the arrangements, "are you certain about this? The Council's security detail is following in the Hegemony cruiser, but they can't protect you if something goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," Zarathal said with surprising confidence. Jake Torres, the ship's engineer, looked up from his station. "Well, I wouldn't go that far. The hyperdrive's been making funny noises lately, and we're overdue for a full maintenance cycle." He caught the alien commander's horrified expression and quickly added, "But don't worry, we'll get there in one piece. Always do." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's medic and science officer, chuckled from her position at the sensor station. "Jake, you're terrible at reassuring passengers." "Hey, I'm honest," Jake protested. "Rather have someone know what they're getting into than lie to them." This casual banter between the crew fascinated Zarathal. On Velsharan ships, there was strict hierarchy. Officers didn't joke with their captain or admit to equipment problems in front of royalty. Yet these humans seemed completely comfortable with their apparent disrespect. "Captain," she said, "your crew speaks very freely." Sarah Mitchell laughed. "They better. Can't run a ship properly if people are afraid to tell you the truth." She swiveled her chair to face the princess. "Elena's saved my life at least 3 times, and Jake's jury-rigged solutions have gotten us home when proper repairs would have left us stranded. I trust their judgment more than anyone's." The hyperdrive engaged with a sound like distant thunder, and the stars outside stretched into lines as they entered hyperspace. Veltar's tentacles writhed nervously, but the transition felt smooth to Zarathal. "Smoother somehow than in ships 3 times the size. How is that possible?" she asked. "How's what possible?" Captain Mitchell replied. "The jump. It felt gentle. Most ships shake the passengers around when entering hyperspace." Jake Torres grinned and patted a nearby console covered in handwritten notes and small modifications. "That's because most ships treat the hyperdrive like a sledgehammer. Brute force approach. We tune ours like a musical instrument." He pointed to a series of dials that had been added to the original control panel. "See these? They adjust the field harmonics during transition. Takes longer to engage, but the ride's a lot smoother." "You modified standard hyperdrive technology?" Veltar asked, sounding shocked. "Well, yeah," Elena said from her station. "Standard technology is designed to work for every species in the galaxy. But we're not every species. We're human, so we modify everything to work better for us." Zarathal looked around the bridge with new eyes. Now she noticed the modifications everywhere. Control panels had been moved to more comfortable positions. Seats had been adjusted for human proportions. The lighting was warmer than standard ship illumination. Even the air recycling system hummed at a frequency that felt more natural. "This entire ship has been personalized," she said, wonder in her voice. "Of course," Captain Mitchell said. "We live here 8 months out of every year. Might as well make it home." Over the next few hours, Zarathal observed the crew going about their duties. She expected to see the rigid efficiency common on military vessels, or the careful protocols of diplomatic ships. Instead, she watched something entirely different. When a minor power fluctuation occurred in the cargo bay, Jake didn't follow standard procedure. Instead, he grabbed a toolkit and went to investigate personally. He found a loose connection, something that would have gone unnoticed for weeks on most ships and eventually caused a major failure. When Elena detected unusual radiation signatures from a nearby nebula, she didn't just log it in the ship's database. She spent 2 hours analyzing the readings, discovered they indicated a previously unknown stellar nursery, and sent the data to the Galactic Science Consortium. When a distress signal came from a mining station 12 hours off their course, Captain Mitchell didn't hesitate to respond, even though it would delay their arrival. "We have to reach Velshara urgently," Veltar protested. "The peace negotiations will happen when they happen," Captain Mitchell interrupted. "People need help now. The mining station's main reactor was failing. The technicians there had followed all standard procedures but couldn't solve the problem." Jake spent 40 minutes crawling through maintenance shafts, came out covered in coolant fluid, and announced he'd found the issue. "Your quantum regulators are misaligned," he told the station chief. "Probably happened during your last supply run when they installed new equipment. The vibrations threw off the calibration by 0.03 degrees. That small a deviation shouldn't matter," the chief replied. "Shouldn't, but does," Jake said cheerfully. "Quantum systems are finicky. Like people, sometimes the little things make all the difference." 2 hours later, the reactor was running perfectly. The mining station crew offered payment, but Captain Mitchell waved it off. "Just pass it along," she said. "Help someone else when they need it." As they resumed course for Velshara, Zarathal found herself in the ship's small galley with Dr. Vasquez. The medic was preparing something called coffee, a human stimulant beverage. "Your crew is very flexible," the princess observed. Elena smiled. "We have to be. Space is dangerous, and we're usually operating with limited resources, so we learn to improvise, adapt, overcome." She poured 2 cups of the dark liquid. "Want to try some?" "Fair warning, it's an acquired taste." Zarathal accepted the cup and took a careful sip. The bitter warmth was unlike anything she'd experienced. "It's quite strong. That's the point. Jake says coffee is humanity's greatest invention after the wheel and antibiotics." Elena sat down across from her. "Can I ask you something, Your Highness? Why did you really choose our ship? I mean, some of those vessels back at the station were incredible. Works of art." Zarathal considered the question carefully. "They were perfect," she said finally. "Too perfect. Built by committees designed to impress, following specifications created by people who would never actually use them." She took another sip of coffee. "Your ship is different. It was built by people who understand that perfection isn't the goal. Usefulness is, Elena said. "Never thought of it that way." "Your people," Zarathal continued, "you don't try to dominate your technology. You work with it. Partner with it. That's unusual." Before Elena could respond, Jake's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up something big-headed our way, and I don't think it's friendly." The bridge erupted into controlled activity as the crew responded to Jake's warning. Captain Mitchell was at the sensor station in seconds, studying the readings while Elena began running system diagnostics and Jake monitored their hyperdrive performance. "What are we looking at?" Captain Mitchell asked, her voice calm despite the potential threat. "Big ship," Jake reported, highlighting the contact on the main display. "I mean really big. Dreadnought class, maybe bigger. It dropped out of hyperspace about 2 million kilometers behind us and it's accelerating to intercept." Veltar's tentacles went pale. "Scan for weapon signatures," he ordered, then caught himself. "I apologize, Captain. Old habits." "No problem," Sarah said, understanding the alien commander's military instincts. "Elena, what do you see?" Dr. Vasquez ran her hands over the sensor controls, her expression growing more concerned by the second. "Multiple energy signatures consistent with heavy plasma cannons, torpedo tubes, and something I've never seen before. The computer can't identify it. Princess Zarathal moved to look over Elena's shoulder at the display. The massive ship was gaining on them rapidly, its dark hull bristling with weapon emplacements. Kethmoran war vessel, she said quietly. Butcher-class battleship. Friends of yours? Jake asked hopefully. Hardly, Veltar replied, his voice tight with worry. The Kethmoran Empire has been expanding aggressively for the past decade. They've been looking for an excuse to invade Velcheron space. And capturing their princess would be a pretty good excuse, Captain Mitchell said grimly. How long until they reach weapons range? At current speeds, 37 minutes, Elena reported. Jake looked up from his engineering station. I can give us more speed, but not much. Their ship's just too big and too fast. Zarathal felt ice form in her stomach. She had insisted on this humble human ship, and now her choice might doom them all. The Kethmoran were known for their brutality. They would capture her, use her as leverage against her people, and probably space the human crew just for sport. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I've doomed you all with my stubbornness. Captain Mitchell turned from the display, her expression surprised. What are you talking about? If I had chosen one of the warships, we could fight back. Instead, I picked a cargo vessel with no weapons. Who says we can't fight back? Jake asked with a grin that didn't quite hide his nervousness. This is a cargo ship, Veltar pointed out. You have no defensive capabilities. We have no weapons, Elena corrected. That's not the same thing as no defensive capabilities. Captain Mitchell was already moving toward the navigation console. Elena, what's our current position relative to the Helix Nebula? About 40,000 kilometers trailing edge, bearing Mark 7. Perfect. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls. Jake, I need you to reverse engineer the modifications we made to the hyperdrive sensors. Reverse engineer them? Why would I want to... Oh. Jake's eyes lit up with understanding. Oh, that's devious. I like it. Zarathal looked between the humans, completely lost. What are you planning? Well, Captain Mitchell said, making course corrections as she spoke. The Kethmoran have better ships, bigger guns, and more armor, so we're not going to fight them. Then what? We're going to make them fight the nebula instead. Elena began pulling up stellar cartography data. The Helix Nebula contains 17 pulsars, 43 gravity wells, and enough electromagnetic interference to scramble sensors for hundreds of kilometers. Most ships avoid it because navigation is nearly impossible. Jake added, working frantically at his station. The magnetic fields play havoc with standard guidance systems. But our guidance system isn't standard anymore, Captain Mitchell said. Remember Jake's modifications to the hyperdrive sensors? He recalibrated them to filter out specific types of interference. Understanding dawned on Zarathal's face. You can navigate in there, but they can't. Exactly. We go in, they follow, and then... Sarah shrugged. Well, space is dangerous. Accidents happen. This is insane, Veltar said. You're talking about flying blind into one of the most dangerous regions in this sector. Not blind, Jake corrected, making final adjustments to his improvised navigation system. We'll have about 60% sensor clarity. Not great, but workable. And them? They'll have maybe 10%. If they're lucky. The Kethmoran battleship was gaining fast now, close enough that they could see individual weapon turrets turning to track their movement. Captain Mitchell angled their course toward the swirling, colorful chaos of the nebula. Warning shot across our bow, Elena reported as energy blasts lit up space nearby. They're ordering us to stop. Yeah, that's not happening, Sarah said. She activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands prepare for rough flying. We're taking a shortcut. The stellar wind plunged into the nebula like a small boat diving into a storm. Immediately, the outside view transformed into a swirling chaos of gas, dust, and energy. The ship's lights dimmed as electromagnetic pulses washed over them. Sensors are degraded but functional, Elena reported, her voice steady despite the stress. I can track major obstacles but not fine details. Good enough, Captain Mitchell said, her hands dancing over the flight controls as she steered around a cluster of charged particles that would have fried their systems. Behind them, the Kethmoran battleship followed, its massive bulk less maneuverable in the chaotic environment. Within minutes, Zarathal could see the difference. The human ship moved like a dancer, flowing around obstacles and riding the electromagnetic currents. The battleship lurched and stumbled, its powerful engines fighting the nebula's influence. They're falling behind, Jake reported with satisfaction. and their weapon locks keep breaking every time they try to target. But the real advantage became apparent when they encountered the first major obstacle, a rogue planetoid wrapped in its own magnetic field, creating a navigation nightmare of shifting gravitational effects. Standard procedure says go around, Elena said, studying the readings. Standard procedure also says don't fly into nebulae, Captain Mitchell replied. Jake, can we thread the needle? Jake studied the gravitational eddies around the planetoid, mentally calculating their trajectory. It'll be tight, but yeah, the magnetic field will actually slingshot us forward if we hit it right. They dove toward the planetoid, using its gravity well to increase their speed while the magnetic field hid them from sensors. The Kethamoran ship, following standard military doctrine, attempted to go around the obstacle. That's when they hit the pulsar's gravitational wake. Their ship is in distress, Elena reported, watching the massive vessel struggle against forces its crew couldn't properly detect. Hull stress indicators, power fluctuations. They're in trouble. Zarathal watched the display with mixed feelings. The Kethmoran were enemies, but watching any ship die in space felt wrong. Captain Mitchell seemed to share her thoughts. Elena, can you boost our communication array? Full power. In this interference? It'll drain our batteries, but yes, do it. Send them our navigation data. Emergency frequencies only. What? Veltar's tentacles writhed in shock. You're helping them escape?
I'm keeping them from getting crushed by a gravity well, Sarah replied firmly.
There's a difference between outrunning someone and watching them die. Captain, Jake said quietly. They were trying to capture us. Probably kill us. And now they're sailors in distress, Captain Mitchell said. We help sailors in distress, period. The communication burst went out, carrying the sensor data the Kethmoran needed to escape the pulsar's influence. Minutes later, they watched the battleship pull free of the gravity well and limp toward the nebula's edge. They'll think twice before following anyone else in here, Elena observed. As they cleared the nebula's far side, Zarathal found herself staring at Captain Mitchell with new respect. You saved them? Yeah, well, Sarah said, looking slightly embarrassed. Like I said, space is dangerous enough without making it worse for each other. Your Highness, Veltar said slowly, I'm beginning to understand why you chose this ship. Zarathal nodded, watching the stars return to normal view outside the windows. She was beginning to understand something too, something about humans that made them uniquely valuable in a galaxy full of species that had forgotten how to be flexible, creative, and surprisingly merciful. 2 days into their journey, with Velshara growing larger on the navigation display, Princess Zarathal found herself unable to sleep. She wandered the ship's corridors, something she'd never done on any other vessel. The stellar wind felt safe in a way that the luxury ships never had, despite their advanced security systems. She discovered Captain Mitchell in the small observation lounge, staring out at the stars while nursing a cup of coffee. The captain looked up as she entered. Trouble sleeping, Your Highness? We've got some mild sedatives in the medical bay if you need them. No, thank you. Zarathal settled into the chair beside her. I was thinking about home, about what waits for me there. Through their conversations over the past 2 days, Sarah had learned that Velshara was on the brink of civil war. 2 factions of the ruling family disputed succession rights, and only Zarathal, as the neutral heir, could prevent bloodshed. But the pressure of that responsibility weighed heavily on the young princess. Scared? Sarah asked gently. Terrified, Zarathal admitted. My cousins have been preparing for this moment their entire lives. They have armies, supporters, detailed plans. I have hopes and good intentions. Sometimes that's enough, Captain Mitchell said. Sometimes it's more than enough. How can you say that? You've seen their warships, their technology. They'll demand proof of strength. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Can I tell you about my first command? Zarathal nodded, grateful for the distraction. I was 26, fresh out of the Merchant Marine Academy, and they gave me an ancient cargo hauler called the Lucky Strike. She was 40 years old, held together with spare parts and stubbornness, and had a crew that didn't trust their new baby captain as far as they could throw her. What did you do? Panicked, mostly, Sarah laughed. For about a week. Then we got a distress call from a research station that had lost main power during a solar storm. The military ships were all deployed elsewhere, and we were the only vessel close enough to help. Zarathal leaned forward, interested despite her worries. The station had 200 people and maybe 8 hours of emergency life support left. My chief engineer, a grumpy old spacer named Murphy, told me it was impossible. The power couplings they needed weighed more than our cargo capacity, and even if we could carry them, we'd never get there in time. But you tried anyway? I listened to him explain all the reasons why it couldn't be done, and then I asked him how we could do it anyway. Sarah's eyes sparkled with the memory. Turns out we didn't need to carry new power couplings. We needed to help them fix the ones they had. So we grabbed every spare part in our cargo hold, threw together a makeshift repair kit, and made the run in 6 hours. Did it work? Better than that. Murphy and the station's engineers put their heads together and came up with a repair technique that's now standard emergency procedure throughout human space. Sometimes the experts need someone who doesn't know why something is impossible to find out how to make it possible. Zarathal considered this. You think my lack of military training might actually be an advantage? I think, Sarah said carefully, that armies and warships can force people to obey, but they can't make people believe. You want to unite your people, not just defeat your cousins. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's voice over the intercom. Captain, we're receiving a coded transmission from Velshara. It's complicated. Minutes later, they were all gathered on the bridge listening to a message that made Zarathal's heart sink. The civil war had already begun. Her cousin Drakthor had declared himself the rightful heir and seized the capital city. Her other cousin, Mel Andra, controlled the outer provinces and the fleet. Both were demanding that Zarathal support their claim. The message gets worse, Elena said grimly. There's been fighting in 3 major cities. Casualties are mounting, and both sides are threatening to escalate further if you don't arrive soon to break the deadlock. How long until we reach Velshara? Zarathal asked, her voice tight with stress. 18 hours at current speed, Jake replied. I could push the engines harder, but do it, she said. My people are dying while I travel in comfort. Your Highness, Veltar interjected, perhaps you should contact one of the factions directly. Negotiate a ceasefire until you arrive. Zarathal shook her head. The moment I speak to one and not the other, they'll assume I've chosen sides. It will only make things worse. Captain Mitchell studied the star chart. There might be another option. What do you mean? You can't talk to them separately without causing problems. But what if you talk to them together? Impossible, Veltar said. They refuse to be in the same system, let alone the same communication channel. Not necessarily, Elena said, catching on to Sarah's thinking. If we could establish a 3-way communication link, they'd have to talk to each other, Jake finished. Through you. Zarathal looked between the humans, hope beginning to replace despair. Could that really work? Only one way to find out, Sarah said. But it'll take some creative engineering, Jake. The engineer was already pulling up communication system schematics. I can boost our transmitter array to reach both factions simultaneously. The tricky part will be maintaining signal integrity across that distance while keeping both sides synchronized. How long? Zarathal asked. Give me 4 hours. While Jake worked on the technical solution, Dr. Vasquez helped Zarathal prepare for what might be the most important conversation of her life. They reviewed the political situation, the personalities involved, and potential compromises. The key, Elena explained, is to make them see each other as people, not enemies. Humans learned a long time ago that it's harder to fight someone you're talking to directly. Your species fought civil wars, more than we'd like to admit, Elena said sadly. We got pretty good at ending them too. Usually involves reminding people what they're really fighting for. When Jake finally announced the communication array was ready, Zarathal felt her palms dampening with nervous sweat. She took her position on the bridge while the crew made final adjustments. Remember, Captain Mitchell said softly, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to ask the right questions. The first voice that crackled through the speakers was harsh and demanding. Cousin Zarathal, this delay is unacceptable. My forces control the capital. Acknowledge my claim immediately. Before Zarathal could respond, a second voice cut in. Sister, don't listen to that warmongering fool. The people have risen to support my cause. Stand with the righteous. Enough. Zarathal's voice rang with authority she didn't know she possessed. While you two have been playing war games, our people have been dying. I can see the casualty reports from here. Both voices started to speak at once, but she cut them off again. No. You will listen to me, and you will listen to each other. Drakthor, tell me about the family that lost their home in the fighting yesterday. Melandra, explain to your cousin why their business district had to be evacuated. For the first time in months, the two factions began to communicate directly. Under Zarathal's gentle but firm guidance, they started to see the human cost of their conflict. The princess didn't offer solutions. Instead, she asked questions that made her cousins think about consequences. That's brilliant, Veltar whispered to Captain Mitchell. She's making them solve the problem themselves. Humans call it active listening, Sarah replied. Sometimes the best way to lead is to help others find their own wisdom. By the time they ended the call 3 hours later, both factions had agreed to a temporary ceasefire and preliminary peace talks. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a start. How did you know that would work? Zarathal asked the human crew. Jake shrugged. Most problems aren't really technical problems. They're people problems. Fix the people part and the technical stuff usually follows. Your species has a gift, she said wonderingly. You see connections where others see only obstacles. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe we just learned that the universe is complicated enough without making it harder on ourselves. As Velshara grew larger in the view screen, Zarathal felt something she hadn't experienced in months: confidence. Not because she had all the answers, but because she had learned something valuable from these humans, about asking the right questions. The stellar wind dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Velsharan system, and immediately everyone on the bridge knew something was wrong. The normally bustling space lanes were empty except for debris fields and the occasional emergency beacon. Jesus, Jake whispered, studying the sensor readings. It's worse than the reports indicated. The system was a war zone. Orbital stations hung dark and lifeless. Several of the outer moons showed scorch marks from orbital bombardment. Even from this distance, they could see the wreckage of civilian ships caught in the crossfire. My people, Zarathal breathed, her face pale with horror. What have they done to my people? The ceasefire appears to be holding near the homeworld, Elena reported, trying to find some good news in the data. But the outer system, it's chaos. Veltar examined the tactical display with professional detachment, though his tentacles betrayed his emotion with nervous writhing. Both fleets are massed near Velshara Prime, but they're not engaging. Your communication worked, Your Highness. Captain Mitchell was studying something else entirely. Elena, are you seeing what I'm seeing on the long-range sensors? Dr. Vasquez switched to a different sensor array and her expression grew grim. Confirmed. Multiple contacts bearing 37 Mark 15. Configuration matches Keth Moran heavy cruisers. How many? Zarathal asked, though she dreaded the answer. 15 confirmed, possibly more behind the sensor shadow of that gas giant, Elena replied. They're using the Civil War as cover to position for invasion. Jake let out a string of creative profanity that would have impressed a dock worker. So while the princess's cousins have been fighting each other, the real enemy has been setting up to take over the whole system. Standard Imperial strategy, Veltar said bitterly. Wait for internal conflict to weaken the target, then strike when defenses are divided. Zarathal stared at the display, watching the deadly chess game unfolding in her home system. Her cousins' fleets were powerful, but they were positioned to fight each other, not an external threat. If the Kethmoran attacked now, they could destroy both factions before they could coordinate a defense. We have to warn them, she said. Already working on it, Elena replied, her hands flying over the communication controls. But we're still 12 hours out from Velshara Prime at maximum speed. The Kethmoran won't wait that long, Captain Mitchell said grimly. They'll strike as soon as they think they have maximum advantage. Which would be? Zarathal asked. Jake ran calculations on his screen. Based on their current positions and standard tactics, about 6 hours from now, they'll hit both fleets simultaneously while they're still separated. The bridge fell silent as the magnitude of the problem sank in. Even if they could contact the Velsharan fleets immediately, it would take hours to coordinate a proper defense. The Kethmoran had planned this perfectly. There has to be something we can do, Zarathal said desperately. Actually, Captain Mitchell said slowly, there might be, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. We can't get to Velshara Prime in time to warn your people effectively, but we can get close enough to the Kethmoran fleet to cause problems. Veltar's tentacles went rigid with shock. Captain, this is a cargo vessel. You can't seriously be considering engaging 15 heavy cruisers. Not engaging, Sarah corrected. Disrupting. There's a difference, Elena caught on first. Electronic warfare, she said with growing excitement. We can't fight them, but we might be able to confuse them. Explain, Zarathal said. Jake was already pulling up system diagrams. The communication modifications I made to contact your cousins, I can reverse them again. Instead of boosting our own signals, we could jam theirs. A small ship like ours could get close without being detected, Elena added. Their sensors will be focused on the main fleets, not random cargo traffic. And if we time it right, Captain Mitchell continued, we could disrupt their coordination, just as they're beginning their attack, force them to delay while they re-establish communications. Buying time for the Velsharan fleets to respond, Zarathal finished, understanding the plan. But what about us? Once we start jamming their signals, they'll know we're there. Yeah, Sarah admitted. That's the part you won't like. The plan was desperate, dangerous, and required split-second timing. They would approach the Kethmoran fleet under the guise of being refugee traffic fleeing the Civil War. When the enemy began their attack, the stellar wind would activate Jake's modified communication array at maximum power, creating a localized jamming field that would disrupt coordination between the Kethmoran ships. It's basically a one-shot deal, Jake explained as he made final modifications to their systems. Once we start broadcasting, every ship in a 50,000-kilometer radius will know exactly where we are, and will have maybe 10 minutes before they adapt their frequencies to compensate. 10 minutes to save a star system, Elena said. No pressure. As they approached the outer edge of the system, Zarathal found herself thinking about the human crew. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was probably suicide. None of them had any obligation to Velshara or its people. Why? She asked Captain Mitchell during a quiet moment. Why risk your lives for strangers? Sarah considered the question carefully. My grandmother used to tell me that there are only two kinds of people in the universe, neighbors and neighbors you haven't met yet. The Velsharans seem like good neighbors, even though we're not human. Especially because you're not human, Elena said, overhearing the conversation. Diversity makes everything stronger. The galaxy's more interesting with Velsharans in it. Besides, Jake added with a grin, your people make the best quantum resonators in known space. Be ashamed to lose that technology to the Kethmoran. As they drew closer to the enemy fleet, the tension on the bridge became almost unbearable. The Kethmoran ships were massive, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Each one was large enough to carry thousands of troops and powerful enough to level a city. 15 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 dreadnoughts, Elena whispered, updating their count. They're not planning to conquer Velshara. They're planning to destroy it. Not if we can help it, Captain Mitchell said firmly. They were close enough now to monitor Kethmoran communications. The enemy was indeed preparing to attack, waiting only for their reconnaissance ships to confirm the positions of both Velsharan fleets. Attack begins in 47 minutes. Feltar reported after listening to the intercepted signals. Then we better get ready, Sarah said. Jake, how's our jamming array? Ready to turn their communications into gibberish, he reported. Elena, you got that message ready for the Velsharan fleets? Prepared and queued for transmission the moment we start jamming. And the escape plan? Zarathal asked. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Working on it, Sarah said diplomatically. As the final minutes ticked down, Zarathal realized something profound was happening. 4 different species, human, Velsharan, and Veltar's people, plus the mixed species crew they'd picked up along the way, were working together with perfect coordination. No hierarchy, no arguments about authority, just everyone contributing their unique skills toward a common goal. This is what the galaxy could be, she said quietly. What? Captain Mitchell asked. All of us working together. Not competing, not conquering, just cooperating. Jake looked up from his station. Sounds pretty good to me. But first, let's save your planet. On the display, the Kethmoran fleet began to move. The attack was beginning. Here we go, Captain Mitchell said, her hand hovering over the activation control. Everyone ready? Around the bridge, heads nodded. Even Veltar, despite his military training telling him this was insane, gave his assent. For Velshara, Zarathal said. For good neighbors everywhere, Sarah replied, and pressed the button. The effect was immediate and devastating. As the Stellar Wind's modified communication array came online at full power, the coordinated advance of the Kethmoran fleet suddenly became chaos. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began to drift apart as their command signals turned to static. Jamming successful, Jake reported with grim satisfaction. Their fleet communications are completely scrambled. Emergency broadcast sent to both Velsharan fleets, Elena added. They know about the invasion now. On the main display, they could see the Kethmoran ship struggling to adapt. Without central coordination, individual captains were making their own decisions, and those decisions weren't coordinated with their fellow commanders. Look at them, Veltar said with professional appreciation. They've trained to follow orders, not to think independently. They don't know what to do without their command structure. But their victory was short-lived. As predicted, the Kethmoran were adapting to the jamming frequencies. Slowly but steadily, ships began to re-establish contact with each other. We've got maybe 5 more minutes before they're back to full coordination, Jake warned. And they're definitely aware of us. Now, 3 of the closest Kethmoran destroyers had broken off from the main fleet and were accelerating directly toward the stellar wind. Their weapons were already charging. Evasive maneuvers, Captain Mitchell ordered, throwing the ship into a desperate evasion pattern. The old cargo hauler wasn't built for combat maneuvering, but decades of navigating dangerous space had taught the crew tricks that military pilots never learned. They used asteroid fields for cover, rode the gravity wells of debris to change direction, and generally flew like their lives depended on it, because they did. They're gaining, Elena reported as energy blasts began to bracket their position. Conventional engines can't outrun military ships indefinitely. That's when Zarathal made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Take us toward the main battle, she said firmly. Your Highness, Veltar protested. That's exactly the wrong direction. The safest course is to retreat to hyperspace. No, she said, watching the display as both Velsharan fleets finally began to move in response to their warning. The safest course is to end this war. Captain Mitchell, can your ship do something those military vessels can't? Sarah understood immediately. You want us to get between the fleets. Not between them, Zarathal corrected. Among them. Military ships have to maintain formation, follow protocols, but a civilian cargo ship can go anywhere, Jake finished with a growing grin. I love this plan. What followed was the most insane half-hour of flying any of them had ever experienced. The stellar wind dove into the developing battle like a needle threading between raindrops. Military ships from all 3 factions fired carefully calculated volleys, following rules of engagement and tactical doctrine. The human cargo ship followed no such rules. They skimmed along the hull of a Kethmoran cruiser, using its own bulk to shield them from enemy fire. They rode the wake of a Velsharan destroyer's engine wash to increase their speed. When a group of Kethmoran fighters tried to intercept them, Jake vented superheated coolant from their engines, creating an impromptu smokescreen that confused the pilots long enough for them to escape. This is either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, Elena called out as another volley of plasma fire lit up space around them. Why not both? Captain Mitchell replied, spinning the ship through a gap between 2 colliding vessels that no sane pilot would have attempted. But their real mission wasn't just to survive, it was to communicate. Using their modified communication array, they began broadcasting on every frequency they could reach, carrying messages between the separated elements of the Velsharan fleets. Melandra's forces, this is Princess Zarathal. Drakthor's heavy cruisers are moving to support your left flank. Coordinate your targeting to avoid friendly fire. Drakthor's squadron, your cousin's fighters are in distress near Sector 7. They need immediate assistance. Slowly, gradually, the 2 Velsharan factions began to work together. Princess Zarathal's voice, broadcast from the humble human cargo ship, became the coordination center for the entire defense. The Kethmoran, meanwhile, were learning that their carefully planned invasion was falling apart. They had expected to face 2 separate weakened fleets fighting each other. Instead, they found themselves battling a united force that was adapting faster than their doctrine could handle. Kethmoran flagship is trying to retreat, Elena reported. But the outer system patrol ships are moving to intercept. They planned for conquest, not for a real fight, Veltar observed. Without the element of surprise, they're outmatched. That's when the stellar wind's luck finally ran out. A Kethmoran heavy cruiser, frustrated by its inability to catch the elusive cargo ship, fired a spread of quantum torpedoes on a predicted intercept course. Incoming, Jake shouted, but there was nowhere to run. The first torpedo missed by mere meters. The second struck them amidships, punching through their cargo bay and venting atmosphere into space. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, but the ship was badly damaged. Hull breach on Deck 3, Elena reported, her voice tight with pain from a piece of flying debris that had gashed her arm. Lost main engine 2 and the hyperdrive is offline. We're sitting ducks, Jake said grimly, trying to coax more speed from their remaining engine. That's when something unexpected happened. A squadron of Velcheron fighters, from both factions, appeared around them, forming a protective screen. Their leader's voice crackled over the radio. "This is Commander Thaleron of the Royal Guard. Princess, we're here to escort you home." "And this is Captain Velmorian of the Outer Rim Defense Force," came another voice. "Nobody shoots at the princess while we're around." For the first time in decades, ships from both sides of the Velcheron Civil War were flying together, united in protecting their ruler and the brave humans who had risked everything to save their world. The protective screen held long enough for the tide of battle to turn decisively. With their surprise attack failing and their communications disrupted, the Catamaran fleet began a fighting retreat toward the system's edge. They had come to conquer a divided world and instead found a united people ready to defend their home. "Catamaran forces are withdrawing," Elena reported with relief. "The system is secure." As the immediate danger passed, Zarathal found herself looking around the damaged bridge of the stellar wind. Jake was holding a bandage to a cut on his forehead, while still monitoring their failing engines. Elena was treating her wounded arm while maintaining sensor watch. Captain Mitchell was nursing bruised ribs from when they'd been thrown against her command chair during the torpedo impact. None of them complained. None of them regretted their choice. "Your Highness," came Drakthor's voice over the communication system, "my flagship is moving to escort you to Velshara Prime." "As is mine, sister," added Melandra. "We have much to discuss, but first let us see you safely home." Through the view screen, Zarathal could see the ships of both factions moving into formation around the damaged human vessel. For the first time in years, the Velcheron fleet was truly united. "Captain Mitchell," she said quietly, "I believe you've started something." Sarah looked at the mixed formation of ships around them, former enemies now flying together in mutual protection and respect. "Sometimes," she said with a tired smile, "the best way to solve a problem is to give people something more important to worry about." "Like good neighbors helping each other," Zarathal said, remembering Sarah's grandmother's wisdom. Exactly like that. As they limped toward Velshara Prime, escorted by ships that had been fighting each other just hours before, the princess realized that the Civil War wasn't just ending, it was being transformed into something better. The humans had shown her people what cooperation could accomplish, and that lesson would echo through Velcheron society for generations to come. 3 months later, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Velshara Prime orbital station, watching ships from dozens of different species come and go in peaceful commerce. The sight still amazed her. What had once been a war-torn system was now becoming one of the most prosperous trade hubs in the sector. "Captain," came a familiar voice behind her. Princess Zarathal approached, though she now wore the simple robes of the Velcheron Prime Minister rather than royal regalia. The Civil War had ended not with one faction defeating another, but with both sides agreeing to a new form of government based on cooperation rather than conquest. "Your Majesty," Sarah said, offering a slight bow. "Just Zarathal now," the former princess corrected with a smile. "Or Prime Minister if you insist on formality." "How are the repairs to the stellar wind progressing?" "Jake says she'll be ready for space trials next week. Though I think he's enjoyed having access to Velcheron quantum foundries a bit too much. The ship's going to be more advanced than some military vessels by the time he's finished with his improvements." They watched as a human cargo convoy docked at the station's main port, their ships now bearing the distinctive blue and silver markings of the Velcheron Trade Alliance. The sight represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a formal partnership between species based on mutual respect rather than political necessity. "I've been meaning to ask," Zarathal said, "why did you really choose to help us?" The honest answer, not the diplomatic one. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Because you asked and because it was the right thing to do. Humans have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We couldn't do nothing. It wasn't your war, wasn't it? Sarah gestured toward the bustling station around them. Look what we all built together. This isn't just Velsharan space anymore. It's something new. Indeed, the Velshara system had become something unique in the galaxy. The orbital station served not just as a trade hub, but as a meeting place where different species could learn from each other. Human engineers worked alongside Velsharan quantum specialists. Ethereal artists collaborated with hegemony architects. Even some reformed Kethmoran exiles had found homes here, contributing their military engineering expertise to peaceful projects. The Galactic Council is still trying to understand what happened here, Zarathal said with amusement. Their analysts can't figure out how a civil war became a renaissance. Probably because they're looking at it like a political problem instead of a people problem, Sarah replied. Politics is about power. What we did here was about possibilities. Jake Torres emerged from the docking bay, his jumpsuit even more stained than usual and his grin wider than ever. Captain, you've got to see what the Velsharan engineers helped me build. We've got quantum-enhanced life support, adaptive hull armor, and a communication array that can maintain contact across half the galaxy. Jake, Sarah said with mock sternness, please tell me you didn't turn our cargo ship into a warship. Better, he said proudly. I turned it into a mobile embassy. We can carry passengers, cargo, and hope to anywhere in the galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined them, carrying a datapad full of medical research. Her injured arm had healed completely, though she now wore a Velsharan healing crystal as a bracelet, a gift from the medical team that had treated her. The xenobiology exchange program is exceeding all expectations, she reported. We've had breakthrough discoveries in 3 different medical fields just in the past month. Turns out diversity really is humanity's superpower. Speaking of superpowers, Zarathal said, I have news. The Galactic Council has officially recognized the Velshara Trade Alliance as an independent political entity. We're no longer just another member world. We're a sovereign alliance of equals. That's unprecedented, Elena said, understanding the implications. The Council has never recognized a multi-species alliance as a single political unit. They had to, Zarathal explained. We proved that cooperation can accomplish things that competition never could. The other species want to understand how to replicate what we've done here. And I've been asked to address the full Galactic Assembly next month. To explain the human model of interspecies cooperation, Sarah laughed. Is that what they're calling it? Among other things, some of the more traditional species are calling it dangerous, radical, or impossible to scale. But others... She gestured toward the diverse crowd of beings working together throughout the station. Others are eager to try. As if summoned by their conversation, Veltar appeared, his tentacles now adorned with the insignia of the Alliance Security Force. The former military commander had adapted well to his new role as a peacekeeping coordinator. Prime Minister, he said formally, then relaxed into the casual manner he'd learned from the humans. Captain Mitchell, I have the latest reports from our patrol ships. The Outer Rim colonies are reporting the highest levels of trade and cooperation in their recorded history. Any problems? Sarah asked. Nothing we can't handle. A few disputes over mining rights, some confusion about new trade regulations, the kind of problems civilized people can solve with conversation instead of weapons. It was a phrase that had become something of a motto throughout the Alliance. Civilized problems solved by civilized people through. Civilized means there is one thing, Veltar continued. We've received a formal request from the Ethereal Collective. They want to establish an embassy here and begin cultural exchange programs. The Ethereals? Elena looked surprised. They've been isolationist for centuries. Apparently, Zarathal said with a smile. Word is spreading that there's a place in the galaxy where different species can work together without losing their individual identities. They want to be part of it. As the day cycle dimmed toward evening, the 4 crew members of the Stellar Wind found themselves back in their ship's familiar galley, sharing a meal and planning their next mission. The conversation was casual, comfortable, the kind of easy interaction that had originally attracted Princess Zarathal to their vessel. So what's next for us? Jake asked, raising his cup of coffee in an informal toast. Now that we're apparently ambassadors of interspecies cooperation. Same thing we've always done, Sarah replied. Help people who need help, carry cargo where it needs to go, and try to leave places a little better than we found them. Though now we'll probably have a diplomatic escort, Elena added with amusement. I saw the requisition for the new support vessels. Support vessels? Sarah looked alarmed. I never authorized any support vessels. Zarathal's smile was suspiciously innocent. The Alliance Council felt that the ship responsible for founding our organization should have appropriate resources. Nothing too elaborate, just a science vessel, a medical ship, and a diplomatic courier. You're building us a fleet, Sarah accused. We're ensuring you have the tools to continue doing what you do best, Zarathal corrected. The galaxy is full of places that could benefit from the human approach to problem-solving. Jake's grin threatened to split his face. Does the science vessel have quantum laboratories? And a full xenobiology research suite? Elena added, having clearly been part of the planning. And the diplomatic courier? Fastest engines in known space, Veltar said proudly. Plus communication equipment that can maintain real-time contact with the Alliance regardless of distance. Sarah looked around at her crew, her friends, and realized that something fundamental had changed. They were no longer just the crew of a small cargo ship, trying to make a living in space. They had become something larger, more important. But at the same time, they were still exactly what they had always been, people who helped other people, who solved problems with creativity and compassion, who believed that the universe was better when everyone worked together. All right, she said, finally raising her own cup. To the stellar wind and all who sail in her. May we always find good neighbors among the stars. To good neighbors, the others echoed, and for a moment, the small galley of an old cargo ship contained all the hope and possibility of an entire galaxy, learning to live in peace. Outside the viewports, ships from a dozen different worlds moved through space in perfect harmony, carrying goods, knowledge, and dreams to every corner of known space. And somewhere in the vast cosmic distance, other species who had heard about the miracle of Velshara were beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to live among the stars, the human way.